Welcome back to this complete new series on full stack web development using Next.js. In the last video, we have learned how to create a whole new Next.js project from scratch, and in this video, you're going to learn about the basic concepts of what is a component and how to create our first component in Next.js. We will start with the basics and then we will cover the advanced topics like server-side components and client-side components in Next.js. In case you are new to this channel, do not forget to check out my last video in this series, and if you are interested in learning full stack web development, this course will serve the purpose for you. And also do subscribe, like and share this video with your fellow programmers. It helps me in creating more videos like these. So we'll start with our first and foremost important thing, which is to learn what is a component. So going back to our code editor, we'll see what is the built-in element which is provided to us by HTML. So elements that are provided to us by HTML language in order to render UI with information like graphic, text, video, etc. is called an HTML element. So in order to show you an example of what is an HTML element, I'll go back to the src folder in my application, and inside src I'll go to app folder, and under app I have page.js file. So every element that you see over here, which is main, div, paragraph, code, anchor tag or any other element, is the native HTML element provided to us by HTML language. One common example to differentiate built-in elements from the custom components is that the custom components mostly start with the capital letter and the HTML elements start from the small case. So I'll quickly start the project by running npm run dev and going to my web browser. You can see that it has the last code that we created over here. So I'll quickly get back to my Visual Studio Code, and I'll first of all remove this element from here. I'll save this. Now everything looks clean. Now I'll try to modify my text over here. So if I get back to my page.js file, and over here, if I try to change this, I'll save this. And now if I get back to my code editor, you can see that the text has changed. So this is the way in which we can change the text or we can update any other content in the native HTML element, which is quite easy. Now the limitations over here is that if I alter the styles of an element at one place, or if I update the content of an element at one place, and I would like to repeat that same information over different pages, I would have to do this change at every single place where I have done that change already. I'll show you an example what does this means. Now I'll create a custom component and show you what problem statement means. Problem that is related to repeating the styles and any other modification to a native HTML element, and the reason why we use custom components. So I'll quickly create a new page. So I'll create a blog page, and don't worry about this changes that I have done right now. Blog is simply a page that will be loading in our web browser by simply going to localhost 3000/blog, and page.js refers to a web page in our application. So in order to show you an example, I am doing some things that we'll be learning later on, but please ignore this now and we'll learn about this thing in detail later on. So if I create a new file, I'll go inside this file, I'll create a new exportable component, I'll remove the TypeScript implementation, I'll simply write blog over here and click on save. I'll also create a new paragraph element and I'll write blog sample over here. I'll save this, I'll copy this same element and I'll go to page.js and I'll add this same element over here. I'll click on save, and now if I get back to my web browser, you can see that the element that we added for blog example is loading over here. Similarly, if I go to localhost 3000/blog, you are able to see that we can see similar element over here, that is blog example. Let's say if I now wanted to change some properties of this element. Let's say I wanted to change the color from white to yellow, then how I would do it. So let's get back to our code editor again. And now if I go to my paragraph element and I change the styles, and if I change the color, let's say I change it to red now and I click on save, you can see that the color of our paragraph element has changed over here at the home page. But now if I go to my blog page, you can see that the color over here has not changed. Now just in case if this was a common UI and I would have to load similar kind of colors for every element that were used for this place, I would have to manually implement those things at every place where I need the similar UI. For example, if I get back to my Visual Studio Code editor, and if I had to use similar kind of color at the page inside blog, I would have to implement this change over here as well. And if I save it over here now, you can see that the HTML element has changed over here at the blog page as well as it has changed on the home page. So this shows you the first problem, that is the reusability concept. Apart from this, there are more problems related to CSS overlapping, and I'll show you with an example what do I mean by CSS overlapping. For example, if I get back to my global CSS file, which is globals.css, and if I create a new class over here, I'll simply use a class name called blog text. And if I change the color over here to, let's say, red, and I save this, now I'll use this class name and I'll go to our page.js file, and over here we already have layout file importing this global CSS file, so we'll not be importing it over here again at any other place. And I'll simply remove this styles statement over here and I'll use class name. So in React and Next.js, we don't use class in order to specify our class, but we use JSX statement, which is class name. So I'll simply paste my class name over here. I'll save this and let's load our web page again. So if I get back to my web page and I refresh it over here, so you can see that the color of the paragraph element is still red. It's coming from the class, and you can also inspect this and verify over here. You can see that the class over here is blog text and it is coming from the layout CSS file that we added. Also, now if I go to my blog page, you can verify that the color over here is still red, but it's not coming through the CSS file, but it's coming from the element. So just how we created a class and then we use the class name in our element, we'll try to create a new file for this blog page separately, and then we'll create a similar class name and assign it a different color over here for the blog page. This is a quite common scenario in web development, so we'll try to replicate this over here. So if I get back to my Visual Studio Code, and now over here inside my blog, I'll create a new class over here and call it blog.css. And over here, I'll copy this exact class name that we created inside the globals.css. So I'll copy this from here. I'll get back to my blog.css file, and over here, I'll change the color to, let's say, yellow. I'll save this and I'll now use this class name inside our blog page. So I'll remove the styles from here and I'll use the class name and I'll specify the class over here. And now if I import my blog.css inside my page.js file, and if I import this blog CSS file over here and I save it, let's now go to our blog page. And over here you can see that the color of paragraph element has changed to yellow. So this looks good. We have red over here and we have yellow where we need it. Why does it works? So it works because we have CSS cascading over here. So if I show you an example, you can see that global CSS over here is at the root level of our application. And we have our paragraph element with red color coming from global.css. But when we create a new component and we have a custom CSS file inside that component, we create and override this blog text class over here from global CSS and assign yellow color to it. And due to CSS cascading, our global CSS file is overridden for that specific class name and the blog CSS is used. But this creates a confusion since we have same class name coming in with different colors. And I'll show you how does this cascading affects our application. So let's get back to our code editor again. And inside this, if I move the blog.css file to the root level, and if I try to change the import statement, I'll remove this import statement from here and I'll get back to my layout file. I'll import this over here, save this everywhere. Now you can see that I've changed the order of our importing styles. Now if I go back to my web browser, you can see that the color of our blog element has changed to red at the blog page, as well as if I go back to my home page, you can see that over here also it's red color. And if I inspect it closely, the blog text class is same and the color is coming from layout.css file since we imported our CSS file inside layout. So if I get back to the blog page again and inspect this as well, it again imports the same file. And over here you can see that there is a stroke over here at the same class name which removes yellow but uses red. So what does this mean? This means that the last color provided by a CSS file, the CSS file that was imported at the last, is being used and the previous one is overridden. So in order to remove this inconsistency, we have concepts of components and modular CSS in React and Next.js. So in order to explain you, I'll quickly close all the tabs. I'll delete the CSS file that we created. I'll remove the imports from here. I'll also remove the paragraph element from here. I'll save this and again remove the paragraph element from our home page as well. Save this as well. I'll also delete this div and save this. Also, let's check if our application still works. So I'll go back to my web browser, refresh this and see if our application is still working. I'll go to the blog page and it loads, but it has no element, so we don't see a UI. Now in my src folder, I'll create a new folder and call it components. I'll create a new component over here. I'll create a folder and let me call it blog title. This is a folder. Inside this, I'll create another file, which is blogtitle.js file, or I'll name it JSX. Inside this, I'll create a new component. I have a plugin installed, which creates the component automatically for me, but I'll show you how we can do it manually. So in order to create a component, you can remove everything. You have to use constant. You can add any name you want, but it's good to use the proper component name which matches closely to your file name. So once you do this, you have to call ES6 arrow operator, and then you have to export this function in order to call this through this file. So I'll export it as a default, and you have to return an element from this. So for now, I'll simply return a paragraph element, inside which I'll write blog title and then save this. Now, similar to how we call HTML elements, we can call this blog title custom component or custom element anywhere in our application where we render a UI. So if I get back to my app folder under src, and if I go to our home page, let's add the blog title component over here. So we add a component by using angular brackets and then use blog title. You can close this with self-closing bracket, or you can pass another component or element inside this, for example over here, and then pass this element that you pass as a child inside these opening and closing brackets inside the blog title component itself. So for the simplicity purpose, let's use the self and closing bracket now, and then save this. Let's get back to our web browser again. I'll also open the terminal so that we can see if there are any errors in the application. So on our home page, you can see that the blog title example component is shown over here. And if I would like to repeat this component n number of times, I can do that easily. So I'll show you that. In our application, I simply have to copy this custom component and paste it as many times as I need. And on our web browser, you can see how this is rendered. And if I would like to use this same component inside our blog page, which is currently empty, I can do that as well easily. So if I simply copy this component, and by the way, you can import this component using @alias that we used while creating this project, or you have to exclusively import it using the path and then identifying the correct path for this module. So we are avoiding this now. We'll learn this import section in different video, and I'll simply copy this component from here and go to my blog page, and in between these divs, I'll add this component over here. Format this and save. Now if I get back to my web page, it shows me an error that this is not defined. This error comes when you have not imported this component. So I'll import this now. Import blog title, and it will import it from components path blog title. So I'll save this now, get back to my web application, and you can see that this component is shown over here. Similar to how we did it before, we can paste it over here, save this, and this will be repeated that many times. Also, there is another way how we can repeat this. I'll show that to you as well. Let's say if I had blog data coming in through some API or some constant place. So I'll write blogs is equals to an array which consists of number of blogs that might be there in the application. Let's say that the blog has 3 posts and we have different data in a form of array. Then we can call this blogs array inside our application. We'll remove everything from here. I'll simply call blogs I'll use curly braces in order to use the actual value of these blocks, and I'll use map operator provided by JavaScript, which consists of two arguments. First one is the block data itself, second is the block index. I'll then return block title, and this block title will again have self-closing bracket, and I'll save this. Let's get back to our web browser again, and you can see that the block title example is repeated 3 times. I'll show you if we increase the count over here. If we add one more element in the array and save this, you can see that one more block title example has been added. So this is a way in which we repeat lot of data easily without having to call the same component over and over again, and it also makes our code look quite clean. So you can see over here, our code looks very clean over here. We can also assign this to some other variable and then use that variable value over here. So now we'll see the modular CSS which solves the problem of CSS cascading in our application. So I'll go back to global.css file, and you can see that block text over here shows red color. So in our block title, I'll copy this file name and create a new file called block title.module.css. So CSS modules is a concept provided by React and Next.js that bundles CSS files and its class names uniquely for each file name that is associated with these modules. So I'll show you with an example. So if I get back to my global CSS, I'll copy this exact class from here. I'll paste it over here and change the color to yellow. I'll do this and save this. And inside our block title.jsx, I'll import this. So the way in which we import CSS modules is quite different than how we import global CSS. So I'll use import statement. I'll assign this to a unique file name, which is styles. You can use any name. You are free to do so. I'll import styles from the file name that we have over here. So just like how we imported the CSS file in the previous example, I've imported styles from a modular CSS. The way in which we import is quite similar to how we did before. This should also ideally do the CSS cascading, but it will not since we are using modular CSS. So I'll go back to our application, but before that I'll fix a typo over here. I'll export this component, save this, and inside a paragraph element, I'll first of all assign this block text as a class name. I'll assign this over here, and inside our page.js file, I'll remove rest of the components and keep one for the simplicity purpose. And now, before we move on to our web page, try to guess what should be the color of paragraph element at the blog page and as well as at the home page. Pause this video, take some time and understand what should be the color of the paragraph element. You can see how we have imported the styles. Our layout first imports the global CSS file, and global CSS file has the red color for this class name. And similarly, we have imported block title.module.css file inside block title, and this has yellow color over here for the same class name. It's just like how we did before. Now if I get back to my web browser, you can see the color of the paragraph element over here at the blog page is red, and over here at the home page is also red. So why it has not used yellow color? This is because we cannot use the class names in CSS modules just like how we use it for normal classes. So in order to use these styles coming in from the CSS modules, you will have to use a special way. You'll have to use angular brackets. You have to use the style statement that you have declared at the top. And then over here, you have to specify the block text class name and then save this. Now if we get back to our application, you can see that the blog title example text has changed to yellow, and similarly at the blog page as well. So I hope that you understood what are components in React and Next.js, what are the problems that come with native HTML elements, and how we can use custom components to solve the problem that come with traditional HTML, CSS and JavaScript. This is it for this video. Keep watching this series and do follow me, subscribe to this channel for more amazing and interesting videos like these. So see you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.